work, one whole day to play. Come on, everybody, wear your roller skates today. It's Saturday, 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 it's Saturday, Saturday, it's Saturday, Saturday, it's Saturday, yeah.
Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of Career Exploration Saturday. I'm your host, Ebony Tyler. I have real conversations with real people about real jobs. So this week, my guest is Martin Smallhorne, school leader. Shout out to Day One supporter Nicolette Emerson for introducing us to Martin. We talk about his immigrant experience and landing in the village of Brownsville and how to make more Martin Smallhorns, Black men in education. All right, let's jump right in. Good morning and welcome. Welcome, Martin. Welcome to Career Exploration Saturday. I'm so glad to have you here today.
Good morning, and thank you for having me. Thank you for having me. I appreciate this. Thank you.
So, we like to start all the career conversations. Tell us who 16-year-old Martin was. Did you have it all together? Did you know what you wanted to be?
16-year-old Martin Smallhorne was, I had just moved from Brownsville, Brooklyn to Richmond Hill, Queens. 16-year-old Martin Smallhorne was back in Brownsville, slapboxing champion of the block. And because that's what we did in Brownsville, Brooklyn. You know, your environment is everything. 16-year-old Martin Smallhorne moved to Queens, wanted to slapbox, because that's what I knew. And kids on the block was like, yo, I need to go do my homework. I need to go study. I don't know what you're talking about because, coming from Brownsville, Brooklyn, I don't know if anyone's familiar with Brownsville, Brooklyn. Shout out to Brownsville, Brooklyn. Never run, never will. But Brownsville, Brooklyn is probably most famous for Mike Tyson coming out of there. It's an interesting neighborhood to come up in. But moving to Richmond Hill, which is more of a suburban urban environment, the mindset is a lot different. So the environment was a drastic change for 16-year-old Martin Smallhorne, and adjusting was not the easiest thing for me.
So what high school were you in?
At the time, I was actually in George Westinghouse Technical and Vocational High School. And shout out to George Westinghouse High School at that time, because at the time, that was 1984, not to date myself, but 1984, it was the beginning of the hip hop era. So I had all of the stars in George Westinghouse at the time. Jay-Z was there, Biggie was there, Busta Rhymes was there. And they weren't who you knew them as now. I mean, if you chronicle the history, I think you guys can put the pieces together. But it was a very interesting high school. It was where you went. For me, it was where I went when I didn't know what high school to go to.
Mm-hmm.
And going back to my history, I arrived in America when I was 6 years old. In fact, I met my parents when I was 6 years old. So I'm a native of Jamaica, West Indies, and I'm also part of the great immigrant story, right? My mom had me when she was 19, and she made the impossible sacrifice of leaving me behind after 9 months. She made a decision to move to America to establish a foundation to try to give us a better opportunity of education and life. And she left with a third grade education, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't meet her until I was 6. And that kind of sacrifice, the only way in my mind, I could ever repay that sacrifice is by working hard and being as successful as I could be, because that's not an easy sacrifice. I mean, most mothers would freak out if they had to leave their baby with someone and go down the block. Imagine leaving your baby behind in a whole nother country and coming here for 6 years. So when they came to get me, and it's the first time I met them, I cried the entire plane ride because I thought my grandmother who raised me was my mom in Jamaica. So I was like, you're taking away from me from my mom. But we landed in a small village called Brownsville, Brooklyn. And Brownsville, Brooklyn, at that time, when I got there at 6 and went to school, I couldn't believe that kids were cursing in school. I was like, what is this? Because in Jamaica, it's a very perennialist system. So if you curse, you get the whip. And so it was just very different. So anyway, I'm at George Westinghouse High School at that stage of my life.
And then when you graduated high school, did you go straight off to college? Did you know what you wanted to pursue? Because you're in education. So
Yeah.
how did you get from Westinghouse High School to college? Because you
Well,
went to Stony Brook.
yeah. So my mom and dad, being immigrants to the country, and Jamaican families, the most important thing is education. Um, but being new to the country, it was just about, you're going to go to school and you're going to do the right thing. There was no like, come home and like, well, did you do your homework or anything? No, you were expected to always do the right thing. So when I was in 12th grade, my grades were pretty good. So I got a Harvard application and I'm running around the school like, I'm going to Harvard. I'm going to go to Harvard. I'm telling everybody. And then my guidance counselor, Mr. Whittam, stopped me in the school and said, what are you doing with that application? I said, man, I'm going to Harvard. I'm going to apply. And I'll never forget this. He said to me, how are you going to go to Harvard? Your parents can't afford that.
Mm.
And I didn't think about that. I knew, I knew we were poor. If you robbed us, you'd probably just be practicing. We were, we weren't there. So I immediately said to myself, you know what? He's right. How am I going to add this burden to my parents who don't have the funds? Why would I do that? But when you don't know the information or the resources that are not there for inner city kids, you don't even think about financial aid, much less, scholarships or anything like that. So I said, you know what? I gave my application to someone, and I decided to just apply to CUNYs because that was affordable. So I got into my first choice, which is Baruch College. And at Baruch, I learned, that it was frustrating getting there. It was like going to the 13th grade, getting on the train every day. No offense to anyone who goes to CUNY, but for me, it was just, I needed to leave the environment. So I chose the number one state university at the time, which was Stony Brook University, and I transferred, and luckily I got in, and yeah, I studied. When I got to Stony Brook, that was also a culture shock because Stony Brook was predominantly white,
Mm-hmm.
and I am coming from the hood, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like I had to adjust to that as well. But still ingrained in me was the work ethic of hard work pays off. So I said, you know what, I'm different, but if I could just outwork everyone, I might not be in my mind. I was like, you don't have to really be the smartest. I don't believe that the smartest kids go to Harvard and Yale and all these schools. I think that the people with the most discipline, attitudes, and the hard work ethic go to these environments. So I decided that I'm going to outwork everyone, and that changed everything because you can respect a lot of things. Men lie, women lie, but numbers don't. So when I got to Stony Brook, I couldn't make up my mind what I wanted to major in. So I did three majors. I majored in history,
Mm.
philosophy, and education for my bachelor's.
Philosophy. What exactly is a philosophy major studying?
Um, if a tree falls in the forest and there's no one there to hear it, does it make a sound? And we study people like Descartes, Socrates, and Nietzsche, and it's just more about conversation, philosophy, getting in depth about existentialism. It's just deep conversation, and it interested me at the time, and it was a lot of fun. I met a lot of interesting people, and I feel like philosophy, you take away the barriers, the culture, you can just sit and have conversation, you know. So yeah.
So, one of the questions I wanted to ask you was, did you have an experience with an educator that made you want to go into education?
Um, you know, you know, growing up, I don't remember too many of my teachers.
Mm.
I um I remember three people. Miss Rinston from third grade, who taught me to say, "You have the audacity to insinuate that I'm prevaricating." So I remember that. You know, I remember a white teacher, Mr. Lawrence, Frederick Lawrence, shout out to him, who introduced me to running. And in sixth grade, was like, you're gonna, let me teach you about running. And for whatever reason, I took interest. And later in my later years, I actually ran the New York City Marathon thanks to him. But one teacher in high school, George Western High School, that stands out is Mr. Coombs, Coombs. Um, Black male teacher. That was my only black male teacher that I can remember actually throughout my whole educational journey.
Mm.
There is another guy in college, but two guys in college. But I often wonder what that does to one's mindset if you're not disciplined, you're not seeing strong male educators in front of you, how that affects you mentally and progressively, right? But Mr. Coombs stood out because he was always Smallhorn. Why are you late to class? Smallhorn, are you going to do your work today? Smallhorn, you're going to sit. So he was someone that paid attention. He paid attention to me. So I remember him, and I'm forever grateful for him for him I guess, jump starting my engine with regards to education, because it was at that time I started to realize, like, what happens to my friends who they're there one week and then they're gone forever, and I don't see them again. Like who's paying attention to them? Who's helping them? What happens to those kids that don't graduate? Where do they go? So that started my energy and my focus towards going into education.
Yeah, I always say to parents, one conversation with a guidance counselor, a teacher, could
Mhm.
change the trajectory of your child's life. And I noticed that with your Harvard story, that kind of
Uh,
breaks my heart a little bit. Know,
yeah,
and that's why I feel like we have to empower young people with information so that
yeah,
when um they meet an educator or they meet a person who tries to deter their dreams, they can push back on it, or at least have the information to be able to do that.
yes.
So let's fast forward. How'd you get to Brooklyn College? My father likes to say him and Don Lemon are the Brooklyn College greatest.
Well, after I graduated Stony Brook University, and I, I went I went to work as a teacher actually, and you know, um, when I decided I was going to go into education and teaching, you have to do what's called an internship in different communities, and try out your teaching styles, right? So I worked in the Three Village School District, which is out in Long Island, which is one of the wealthiest, best kept secrets. Where the kids pull up in Porsches and these things, and they wear their hats, and there's no big deal. Everybody's fine there. But then I went to work in an urban environment called Wyandanch, Long Island.
Mm,
Wyandanch, Long Island, is similar to Compton. There are houses everywhere, but it's a neighborhood where education, where the funding, trying to find a nice way to say this, where it's not well funded, and the educational system, while it is important, our kids are suffering there,
mm-hmm.
and it opened my eyes to where I needed to be with regards to education. And going back to my story with Mr. Coombs, that even furthered my interest in wanting to work with students that were not focused all the time, or students that dropped out of school. So um, I immediately, when I graduated Stony Brook, got a job at the oldest alternative high school in New York City, which was Pacific High School. It no longer exists. It was downtown Brooklyn, but
Mm-hmm.
that's where I started. And after my first year of teaching, I said, teaching is great, but I need to affect more change. So I decided I wanted to be a principal. And after my first year, I enrolled in what's called Poor Man's Harvard, Brooklyn College. And I remember I would go to work from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. And I was living at Queens at the time. And at 3:30, I was on the train to the last stop in Brooklyn. And then I would get out late, and I would take the two trains from the last stop in Brooklyn all the way to the city to take the F train to the last stop in Queens, getting home every night like around 11, 12 o'clock, to get up to study, do homework up at 3 o'clock, and still get up in the morning to be at work at 7 a.m. I did that for 5 years.
Wow.
And
So
yeah,
you knew that coming into education, right? Like very early on in your career,
Mhm.
you knew that you wanted to be a school leader and to be a principal.
Yes, absolutely. After my first couple of weeks actually as a teacher, I said, this is not going to do it. This is not what I'm after. I need to affect real change. Because when you work in the alternative high school system and you see the what the population is about, which is age
Mhm.
17 to 21, um, being one teacher in one classroom daily is not going to affect change with the masses.
Mm.
So I needed to control the situation, so to speak, or at least um, put my educational philosophy at the forefront of the school.
So how long have you been a principal?
So I was a teacher for 5 years, and for the past 20 years, I've been an administrator, a school leader. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
I'm gonna just
I
let
can't
that
believe
go. 20,
I can't
20
believe I
years as a
can't
school leader.
listen. I can't believe it myself. But yeah, at the time, it just you know what, the time did not fly by. People like to say that, you know, it didn't fly by. It's been one of the most beautiful journeys. And my good friend Dr. Tedder, Dr. Hassan Tedder, likes to say, find your purpose, right? And I found my purpose early. And there's that whole thing of you're the master of you're a master. I'm an expert in my field, right? I'm an expert in my field because I've put in 10,000 hours. I've put in over 10,000 hours into my craft. So I'm an expert in my field. But the most important part of that is finding your purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And once you do that, it's just a wonderful life.
Now, COVID, right? We in these COVID times. How have
Yes.
you um, maintained community with your school um, over the last, what, 16, 18 months? You guys were
Yeah.
remote at, right? Because then the high schools were remote for a
Yeah.
while.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's a very good question. I do before I go into that. I do want to say that I'm not here to preach about COVID or anything like that, but I just lost my brother, who's
Oh,
43 years old, to COVID,
mm,
and I'm not here to tell people go get the vaccination or anything like that. Only thing I can say is that COVID is real and it's out here affecting families.
mm-hmm,
So shout out to my brother Corcel. Um, but how the past 18 months have been they've been very interesting, right? Because I how do I keep in contact with my students? First of all, it starts with legacy. Um, there was a principal, Mr. Leader, one of my mentors. Shout out to Mr. Leader, Bernard Gassaway. But Mr. Leader was a principal that ran a school with 5,000 students, and he knew every student's name, and he mentored me in such a fashion that it's important to know every single student. It's important to know their family members, all of their family members if possible. So thanks to that legacy, one of the things that I do in my school is that any student that comes through the door, at a minimum of half an hour, I sit and talk to the family and the student because I need to know who you are. I need to know, what your needs are. I need to know where I need to focus. I need to know how I can best support you. So when you establish these kinds of routines, it's very easy when anything happens to be able to connect with students, whether they're graduated 5 years from now, which I often do, or whether there's a pandemic.
mm-hmm.
The connection is there because that's established in terms of just relationship, right? So I could pick up the phone and feel comfortable calling all my students. It's not like the first time, oh, how are you? Who are you? No, this goes, this what I've created is about really changing the habit of mind, because in this population, students, if you put them in the same environment of your school where, come and do the work, blah, 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 that hasn't worked for this particular population. You're talking about in my population I do, we're just talking about students who had to go to work at 16 years old to support their family. You're talking about students who, unfortunately, because of the criminal justice system, were probably picked up or incarcerated, unjustifiably. And they're coming out, like, it's going to be the norm. No, it's not going to be the norm. I'm going to support you and help you to put you on that path to success. So I bring a certain energy and a certain passion to this. I treat every child as if they were my own child, and what I would expect from them is nothing short of success. So it's very easy for me and my staff to be able to communicate with our student population, our families during the pandemic. And and I turned it up a notch also. If I needed to go to homes to drop off devices, then I would do that. I do whatever I have to do to support this particular population because it's so important. Going back to Mr. Coombs, who paid attention to me, that's why I pay the ultimate attention to every student that we are charged with.
You know, community, right? That's
Yeah,
where we are. And when I say we, I mean Black people, right? we
yeah,
we are a community oriented, family oriented people. So you
yeah.
have to make a connection with the family if you want to be able to reach the student, right?
That's
um
correct.
which leads me to, how do we get more small horns? How do we get more Black males interested in education to go into education? Because, like, I look at my kids' schools,
Hmm.
and the two Black male teachers,
Yeah.
one's technology, one's art, right?
Hmm.
But they need to be teaching, we need to have, Black male teachers teaching core, right? Teaching
Yeah.
math, teaching history, teaching English, and infusing our culture into the curriculum. So
Yeah.
how do we get more Black males or more Black men to want to go into education? I know they have these initiatives, but
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you can put whatever initiative you want in front of people, but it goes back to like really finding your purpose.
mm,
I see my brothers out there, they want to fight the fight. I see them marching and all of that, which is wonderful, and we need to do that. But if you really want to affect change, education is where you can begin. Being up front and center with our students, is so important. The recruitments, I try to encourage Black men to do this, but of course they'll say the money, this, that, but actually the money is pretty good right now.
mm,
The insurance is very good.
mm,
There's a lot of security in being an educator, and the most important thing is you're changing lives, you're impacting generations. So I really don't know what we have to do to bridge that connection. um but it starts, I would say it starts early on with
mm,
putting people of color in the classroom, so our students see that early on, because in our environment, and I know from my boys growing up, we want to be what we see, right? So we see the correction officer, we see the bus driver, we see the sanitation worker. So it's easy. That because in my mind, growing up in Brownsville, Brooklyn, I was like, I'm going to be a sanitation worker because that's what I saw. But it wasn't until I started opening up and seeing different things that I'm like, wait a minute, I could do that too. I could do that. But if you don't know, it's not a goal. So I do what I can to encourage, and I would urge other Black male educators to motivate the masses. But like I said, it doesn't seem appealing. What's appealing right now? Love and hip hop. That's appealing. Being a rapper. These things that they put in front of us to distract us from what we really need to do. Right? Because not everybody can be a rapper. Right? Not everybody can can get into the NBA, right? But what you can do as a Black man is actually become an educator and make a difference, right? So,
So, last question: is there
yeah,
anything that you want to plug? Is there any? How can we support you? How can we find out what Mr. Smallhorn's doing?
okay. So, um, I do have an Instagram live that I would love for people to check out every Friday at 8 p.m. It's called Y.E.S, Your Educational Story, because everyone has a story to tell, but what's your educational story? So I hope you can join us live Fridays, 8 p.m. And my Instagram is m.smallhorne. M. Smallhorne. And I just want to say, shout out to so many of my mentors. Of course, shout out to my producer, Derek Smith, Emerge Group, LLC. And I do want to leave with a quote for everyone out there on their journey. Success is not measured by what you have attained in life, it is measured by what you have overcome while attaining that success.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much. I hope my story is somewhat impactful to those out there. And get into education, Black men. We need you.
Thank you so much, Martin. So, some takeaways are find your purpose. And once you do that, it's a wonderful life. Two, this is for educators. This one's for educators. Know every student and their family. You need to know who your students are, what their needs are, so that when something happens, you already have the relationships with them and their families when you have to make a phone call. And three, our kids want to be what they see. Black men, there are benefits in going into education, like stability, health insurance, pensions. Like making a difference in your community is really something that we need you to do. And thank you so much, Martin. And welcome to the Liberated Success family. Make sure you follow Martin on IG, m.smallhorne. He has a great IG live show. Yes, your educational story. I was on last night, so I hope you got a chance to watch. And thank you for watching and listening all the way to the end. If you find our work impactful, informative, and important, show us some love with a donation. The donation links are in my bio on IG, Twitter, and YouTube. On Facebook, it's the first comment. And if you're listening on the podcast, you can make a donation via listener support. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, subscribe to the podcast, follow us on IG, Facebook, and Twitter. All right, we still in a panorama, so make sure you wear your mask, wash your hands, physically distance, get vaccinated, and all Black Lives Matter. Okay, see you next week. Well, maybe not next week. See you shortly. I'm gonna try to put these out twice a month. Okay, take care. Until next time.
One whole day to play. Come on, everybody.